In the very heart of Rome, where the ancient stones of the Senate still echo with the age of Augustus, and the march of legions once set the rhythm for a mighty empire, a sinister shadow silently grew. Boundless power, a force capable of elevating empires to the heavens or casting them into the abyss of chaos, was preparing to stage a tragedy that would tear apart the most sacred of bonds, those of blood. Caligula, a young emperor initially met with universal jubilation as a symbol of hope, would soon reveal a side of his nature so dark that even the most impartial chroniclers could not describe it without a shudder. This is not merely the tale of a tyrant. It is a narrative of how imperial madness transformed a brother into a ruthless executioner and a family into an arena of humiliation and relentless terror. Should anyone ever doubt the limitless extent of human cruelty when it knows no bounds, this story will surpass their darkest expectations. Rome had for too long breathed the poisoned air of universal suspicion. The previous emperor, Tiberius, had turned the empire into a sinister realm where every glance could become an accusation and any dinner invitation a death sentence. Thus, when the charismatic young man known to all as Caligula ascended the throne, the city was engulfed in jubilation. The populace adored him as the son of the celebrated Germanicus, a general who embodied Roman valor. To the legions, he was the rightful heir. To the senators, a long-awaited relief. To ordinary citizens, a harbinger of brighter days to come. And for a brief moment, it seemed this promise was about to be fulfilled. Upon his ascension, Caligula granted freedom to political prisoners, organized magnificent spectacles, and generously rewarded his supporters. Rome rejoiced, convinced that the nightmare was over. However, this calm proved to be merely the prelude to an impending catastrophe. An unexpected illness brought the emperor to the brink of life and death. Whispers circulated that for several weeks his body wasted away and his mind wandered in delirium, while doctors, priests, and augurs offered prayers to the gods for his recovery. Ultimately, he survived, but he returned a completely different man. The senators immediately noticed the metamorphosis. His gaze burned with a sinister fire, and his smile resembled a malevolent grimace rather than a human expression. The people who had cheered his rise soon began to whisper in the shadows, as the young man who had arrived as a savior began to transform into something monstrous. Initially, these were merely harmless quirks, minor eccentricities that could be attributed to a young emperor's extravagance. But soon, what seemed like mere flamboyance revealed its true nature, the unbridled madness of power. Caligula was no longer content with the title of princeps or Caesar. He demanded worship as a living deity. He ordered a temporary bridge to be built over the Forum so he could parade above mere mortals, as if ordinary ground was no longer worthy of his feet. Imperial feasts transformed into spectacles of humiliation. Esteemed senators were forced to run alongside his chariot under the scorching sun while he mocked them from above. What were once formal dinners became scenes of meticulously planned cruelty. The city, which had naively believed it was welcoming a savior, began to recognize the rise of a tyrant who reveled not only in power, but also in the pain he could inflict. And the worst was yet to come, for if all Rome trembled before his insane antics, within the walls of the imperial palace, his own sisters and brothers would soon discover that blood ties were no barrier to his obsession. For the eternal city of Rome, the imperial family served as a reflection of imperial grandeur. However, for Caligula, it became an arena for realizing his most depraved ideas and morbid obsessions. His own sisters, Drusilla, Livilla, and Agrippina, suddenly ceased to be revered ladies and became objects of his unhealthy attraction. With Drusilla, he maintained an intimate relationship that shocked even the jaded imperial court, long accustomed to various excesses. He openly presented her as his wife at official ceremonies, and after her demise under rather mysterious circumstances, he ordered universal mourning throughout the empire and elevated her to the rank of a goddess. But the most serious danger to him was not his sisters, but his own brother, Drusus Caesar. This young man, renowned for his legendary beauty, strength, and elegance, was the complete opposite of Caligula, who had lost these qualities. In Drusus, he saw an unbearable reflection, a constant reminder of what he had lost, and of what could potentially deprive him of his throne. What by all moral laws should have been a bond of kinship transformed into a sick relationship, permeated by jealousy, obsession, and constant punishments. It was at this point, within the palace walls, that Caligula vividly demonstrated that no family ties could restrain his madness or halt his degradation as a person and a ruler. What began as a shadow of quiet jealousy soon unfolded into a sinister spectacle of absolute domination. At lavish banquets, where tables groaned with delicacies, Caligula transformed the imperial feast into a stage for his cruel performances. The place where political alliances were once forged and important treaties concluded became an arena for meticulously planned and sophisticated humiliations. Drusus, the emperor's brother, born for military glory and honors, was turned into an object of ridicule and mockery. Caligula forced him to appear in public in ridiculous, elaborate outfits, heavily adorned with cosmetics, which erased his masculinity and former identity. Before the astonished senators and courtiers, this promising young man gradually transformed into a pathetic, distorted parody of himself. No one dared to intervene. Fear paralyzed even the noblest hearts, outweighing compassion and humanity. Everyone understood that one wrong gesture, one careless word, could cost them their lives. Thus, the entire Roman court became a silent accomplice to the unfolding atrocities, illuminated by the flickering light of torches and lamps at the feasts. Each sinister laugh from Caligula served as a chilling reminder. There were no boundaries in politics, in personal life, or even in blood ties. Everything could be destroyed by a single whim, a single insane desire born of absolute power. Chroniclers of that era, such as Suetonius and Dio Cassius, left behind testimonies that even today seem more like dark legends than historical facts. Nevertheless, the striking consistency of their accounts prevents these horrifying stories from being entirely dismissed. It was rumored that Caligula turned Drusus' life into a nightmarish, sinister experiment. He surrounded him with Greek doctors and philosophers, ordering them to invent new ways to alter him, to erase any traces of his former personality. Dark whispers circulated about miraculous ointments, strange substances, and endless sessions aimed at changing his appearance and voice. The most unsettling aspect of all this was not the details, but the insane obsession they revealed, the idea that, as emperor and deemed a god, Caligula could shape a person at will, like clay in a sculptor, hands, even his own brother. To the Rome of that century, these accounts seemed almost incredible. Yet at the same time, no one could deny that the emperor's madness had already crossed all known boundaries. Between rumor and reality, one terrifying truth was clear: absolute power mixed with madness is capable of producing nightmares incomprehensible to the human mind. Caligula's atrocities were not limited to simple public humiliation or physical subjugation. His ambitious designs extended far deeper. He sought to eradicate his brother's very personality, reshaping it at his whim. Drusus's name was consigned to oblivion. All his former achievements, military prowess, and virtues were erased from memory. Instead, the emperor imposed humiliating feminine nicknames upon him, trapping him in a fabricated role that obliterated all traces of his true essence. Historians describe the steady deterioration of his condition. The once athletic and promising young man transformed into a pathetic, barely recognizable shadow, imprisoned in a body and life that were not his own. But most terrifying of all was what faded within him: honor, hope, and the very possibility of being himself. Within the palace walls, no trace remained of the brave warrior or noble heir, only a distorted reflection, born of the insane caprice of a tyrant who imagined himself a god. In the atmosphere created by Caligula, the entire imperial court became a theater of silence. Senators, military commanders, and courtiers, frozen with fear, attended feasts and spectacles, not daring to avert their gaze from what was unfolding. All were witnesses to Drusus's tragedy, but not a single voice dared to break the ominous silence. The slightest show of compassion could be interpreted as treason, and a gesture of disapproval as a conspiracy against the emperor. In a realm of all-consuming fear, silence became synonymous with survival. Thus, a peculiar collective amnesia took root. The memory of who Drusus was, his military training and noble lineage, was erased not only by the emperor's will, but also by the efforts of those around him, who hypocritically accepted the image imposed upon him. This forced complicity reveals one of the darkest aspects of unlimited power. It not only destroys the immediate victim, but also corrupts the entire society, turning decent people into silent witnesses of unfolding atrocities. All of Rome, or at least its ruling elite, became a silent accomplice to the tragedy that unfolded before their very eyes, but which no one dared to speak of aloud. One fateful day, Drusus vanished from the annals of history. Imperial archives ceased to mention his name, as if he had vanished into oblivion. Rome, well versed in the intricacies of intrigue and secret assassinations, grasped the sinister meaning of this disappearance. The young heir was erased not only from court life but also from collective memory. Rumors circulated that he had faded away through a slow agony, a victim of humiliating procedures and contempt. Others claimed he was secretly executed at Caligula's whim, the emperor having grown tired of his experiment. Whispers also suggested he was poisoned at one of those monstrous banquets where the emperor indulged in insane fantasies. The official version was never released, only an ominous silence, and perhaps that was the most disturbing aspect. In the heart of a powerful empire, the disappearance of a nobleman required no explanation. Fear gripped everyone, silencing any questions. However, the spiral of madness could not continue indefinitely. Senators harbored unconcealed hatred for him. Patricians lived in constant fear, and even the Praetorian Guard sworn to protect him began to view him with contempt. Every public humiliation, every crime committed under the guise of caprice, eroded the loyalty of those around him. A conspiracy matured, and in a narrow palace corridor, surrounded by those who had once applauded him, Caligula was brutally murdered. The emperor who had proclaimed himself a god met death as a mere mortal, falling victim to the wrath of his own soldiers. But his death did not heal the wounds inflicted. Rome breathed a sigh of relief, yet the shadows of his reign continued to weigh heavily on an entire generation. The atrocities committed within the very heart of the imperial family served as a grim reminder of what happens when power spirals out of control. Caligula's fall marked the end of one man, but also proved that even the greatest empires can crumble under the burden of madness. The tragic fate of Drusus Caesar is not merely a dark episode from Caligula's reign, it is a reflection of what can happen when unlimited power spirals out of control. Rome witnessed how a blood brother became an object of ridicule, how an entire imperial court was forced into silence, and how a personality was destroyed at the whim of one man. Yet, beyond this tragic case, questions arise that remain alarmingly relevant today. How far can a ruler go if no one dares to stop them? How vulnerable is human dignity to a system that encourages blind obedience and punishes compassion? The concentration of power in the hands of one person affects not only the tyrant themselves, but also those who surround them, turning witnesses into accomplices and families into instruments for achieving personal goals. The conclusion is evident. Freedom and justice cannot exist in isolation. They demand unwavering vigilance, clear boundaries, and a society willing to uphold human dignity, even when facing fear. The circumstances of Drusus Caesar's death remain unclear, but his tragic story serves as an eternal warning. It reminds us that when absolute power overrides humanity, even blood ties can be defiled. The Roman Empire has long passed into history, but its lessons remain pertinent. Tyranny is not a relic of the past. It always lurks where vigilance is absent, where indifference allows fear to govern people. And the question remains open. Are we building a society in which tragedies like Drusus's cannot be repeated? Or are we allowing silence and complicity to reopen the doors to tyranny?